So as the title suggests, I have finally clocked about 100 hours on Battlefield 6, as you can see here from the screenshot from Steam. Now 100 hours in terms of a lot of other creators out there isn't that much. I've seen a lot of people posting they've played 300 or 400 hours of the game. So obviously my playtime and my understanding of the game isn't to the same extent of a lot of other creators out there. But for me personally, at least in my own life and scheduling life as well, 100 hours in 7 weeks is actually pretty damn good. I'm a pretty busy guy, but that works out to be pretty much 14 hours a week, which is obviously 2 hours a day. And for me to be doing 2 hours a day of any kind of gaming, let alone just pretty much one specific game, that is a very good sign that I'm enjoying the game. But it also means that obviously I've kind of gotten past that learning period and I now feel very comfortable with all of the different aspects of the game. And so today we're going to be doing almost a bit of a re-review of the game now that I have clocked 100 hours. Now, to be completely honest, this video will probably come across as more negative simply because all of the enjoyable stuff in this game, I already kind of knew that when I did my initial review at launch, whereas now I'm kind of focusing more on the areas that I didn't know I didn't like until I've obviously clocked 100 hours. So it's probably going to come across as a negative video when in reality, I'm very happy with the game so far. And like I said, if I've got 100 hours on a game in general, let alone in 7 weeks, that is a very good sign that I very much enjoy the game. So even though the focus will probably be more the negative stuff, don't take that as me saying this game sucks. I absolutely love Battlefield 6 at the moment, but obviously most of the stuff I've already praised in that initial review, it hasn't really changed in those 100 hours. So just keep that in mind. But with that being said, let's get stuck right into it. Now, I am going to start off with some pros here before we get into some of the cons, because these are some of the pros that I couldn't really tell in the initial period of the game. You need a good amount of time to actually play the game in order to come to these conclusions. Now, the first one that I'm very happy with is actually the way that the Battlefield studios have handled the game so far. I feel like they have been pretty responsive when it comes to, you know, the community having issues with the game, certain bugs or certain things that are broken, and actually having a fairly quick turnaround, not only in addressing that on Twitter or Reddit or wherever they're posting, but then actually getting the updates out and, at least for the most part anyway, fixing a lot of those issues. Now, there are still some things that do obviously need to be fixed. There's a lot of stuff that needs to be tuned, little bits of balancing and stuff like that. I'm not saying the game's perfect, but I do really think they've done a really good job of kind of just trying to get on top of everything and iron out some of those issues, albeit, like I said, not all of them are fixed just yet. And even in the last update, for example, they actually reset a lot of settings, unfortunately. So again, it's hardly been flawless, but I just think they've done a really good job on trying to iron out those issues very quickly. Now, the final pro that I've got as well, which again, just needed a bit more actual playtime compared to the first, week or so of the game, is that still to this day, 7 or so weeks later, I do still feel as though the gameplay and the core mechanics of the game feel really good. I haven't gotten bored with the game. I haven't gotten increasingly frustrated with how certain things work. To me, the gameplay still feels just as addicting now as it did day one. There's nothing that is seemingly a recurring frustration for me in terms of like one super broken thing that is just really, really annoying. There are definitely some things in the game that are slightly annoying, but none of them are to the point of being like game breaking or anything like that. So I do think that, yeah, the just kind of fundamental gameplay in Battlefield 6 is as good as really any Battlefield in the past. Not to say this is the best Battlefield game ever, but when I look back at, Battlefield 3, Battlefield 4, even Battlefield 1, I don't look at those games and think like, oh my God, they just did this part of the game infinitely better than Battlefield 6. I don't think there's that big of a gap between them when it comes to those fundamentals. Each game kind of has its own charm and areas that it did well, but like I said, I do feel as though Battlefield 6 kind of stacks up against those games. Whether it's better than all three of those, that's a different question, and that's going to be different for everyone. But I do think that by the time this game has ended in a few years from now, there is a good chance it will go down as one of the better Battlefield games of all time. And so provided they just keep on, listening to the community, fixing issues and putting out solid content, then I think, at least for me anyway, I'm going to be very happy with the general direction of Battlefield 6. Now, moving on to the cons, and like I said, that was only a few pros. That doesn't mean those are the only things I enjoy about the game. I've just already covered the pros in my initial review, and they haven't changed in 100 hours. So again, keep that in mind. But moving on to the cons, there are definitely a few things that didn't really stand out to me that much at launch because we hadn't had enough time with the game, whereas now after 100 hours, they do definitely just stick out a little bit more. Now, number one for me is still to do with the matchmaking. There are just certain issues with matchmaking that are kind of frustrating. There's a lot of times when I'm getting put into games, and I think this is more a low population problem. For example, being in Australia, there's obviously just not as many players here as there are in the States, for example. But a lot of times I do get put into games and there are just so many bots in these games. And I'm talking like not at freaking 5 a.m. or something. I'm talking, I don't know, 10 a.m. on a Saturday. You would think there'd be people online playing the game. There are still close to 30 million people that live in Australia. You would think there'd be enough to get a full lobby. And unfortunately, a lot of the time there isn't, but I don't think that is purely just to do with the population. I do also think a lot of that stuff is to do with the matchmaking. I think there are a lot of issues with the matchmaking when it comes to how they're actually putting people into games, the timing of how long it takes. Sometimes I'm searching for certain modes for like 2 minutes to get put into a match. And for me, again, this all comes down to just not having the typical server browser that we have always had in the past, at least up until 2042. And I genuinely do believe that just a proper server browser like they have always done would fix 99% of the problems that I have. So it's kind of still shocking to me that they don't seem to get that. I know that there is a server browser in the game. It's not exactly the same as it used to be. It is more focused on the portal modes and the like unofficial experiences, which no one really wants to play unless you're specifically looking for that, at which point, yeah, that's great to have a server browser for that. But for the actual multiplayer modes, in terms of like core multiplayer, conquest, breakthrough, all that stuff, the server browser experience just still isn't good enough in my opinion. You should be able to get put into so many more modes. For example, if I make my own Conquest 24/7 server and you just search without looking for the server browser, you should be able to get put into my server, provided it is obviously an official enough experience where it's still got 100% XP progression, all that stuff. But the fact that they're separated, where there's like the actual just quick match modes where you just search for it and it puts you in, and then there's the server browser modes, that is the core issue to me. So that will always be an issue. I will just literally always complain about that until they fix it. It's surely not that hard to fix, but I don't know, they seem to not understand, or they're purposely just not doing it for some reason. And unfortunately, yeah, in low pop regions, that will in a year or two potentially kill the game off, which is very frustrating considering, like I said, I'm very much enjoying Battlefield 6. Now, the next biggest issue to me that is something I didn't really notice that much at launch, but over the last 100 hours, I definitely have noticed a lot more. This is to do with the audio, and I think that the overall sound design of the game is really solid. I think the like immersion factor sounds really good. All of the actual audio design is good. I think it's more like bug related issues. So there's just certain times when footsteps just won't happen, or there's times when a tank will be right next to you and you just can't hear it for some reason. Those are the sort of issues that I'm talking about, and I think it has seemingly gotten even worse. I don't know if that's just because I've been playing a lot of RedSec, where it is definitely worse than multiplayer. I don't know how that is a thing, but it is like infinitely worse in RedSec. So maybe that's just a placebo that I feel like it's gotten worse when it actually hasn't. But yeah, the audio to me has been pretty bad, unfortunately. Now, they have already confirmed they're doing like a big audio pass to try and fix a lot of this stuff. So maybe not long after this video goes live, that will all be just irrelevant, and maybe I'm just talking shit at this point. But as of right now, before the update that I think is coming on December 9th, the audio is definitely not in the greatest spot, mostly surrounding the like crucial elements, which is kind of the frustrating part. If there was just certain other random noises you couldn't hear, that's one thing. The fact that it's mostly to do with footsteps and vehicles and stuff, that's an issue, because those are like the most important noises you need to hear. If I can't hear footsteps that are right next to me, well, I'm not going to know there's a dude there, and they're just going to sneak up and kill you. It's one thing if they're crouching and stuff, that's fine, but if they're sprinting around, you should definitely just be able to hear them. And then on the flip side, my teammates' footsteps are so loud that it's like too much. So they need to tone those down a little bit, tone up the enemy footsteps just a little bit. And yeah, hopefully if they can fix that in this upcoming update, that will remove that issue for me. But yeah, as of right now, that is definitely something that I'm not very happy with. Now, something else I've noticed a lot more lately is more like netcode related stuff. So having, for example, a lot of desync where I'm behind a wall and it feels like, I don't know, half a second after I get behind that wall, I'm still getting shot and I'm dying, and it shouldn't be happening. Now, sometimes obviously that can be your own internet. Maybe someone's downloading something at that time, and there's always going to be those moments, right? But this feels pretty consistent, and it's not just me. me that's saying this. I've seen so many clips all over the place of people just having insane desync where they're dying around corners, or even some of those hit registration issues I still feel are actually a little bit more linked with the desync of the servers rather than actual hit reg. And so that's another thing that I think they really do need to focus on. Netcode can be very sort of touchy. That's one of the biggest issues that we had with Battlefield 4 at launch. The netcode was kind of absolutely cooked, and that was what caused the pretty horrendous launch of that game. But they did turn it around. So if they can turn it around then, there's no reason they can't turn it around now. And hopefully they can get on that pretty damn quick. Now, something else I have a real genuine issue with, and a lot of you might not care about this because this is related to RedSec, but the fact that the servers are 30 hertz instead of 60 hertz feels really, really bad in my opinion. You can genuinely feel the difference. It almost feels like sometimes you're playing a different game when it comes to RedSec, just because the hit registration and the way the recoil works and just everything to do with the actual gunplay, it all feels just a little bit off. It's not like drastically bad or anything. It just feels slightly different. And to me, this is a pretty big issue, especially with, for example, next week, if you guys haven't seen, there is a RedSec tournament that is a literal $1 million tournament. I'm actually taking part in that as one of the team captains. So if you want to watch some streams, be sure to turn on those notifications because I'll be streaming the entire event. But that is kind of concerning. We're going to be playing on 30 hertz servers. We also have to play in the APAC region on Singapore servers. So I'm going to be on like 100 plus ping on 30 hertz servers trying to compete for about $350,000. That is very rough in my opinion. So obviously we all have to do that. It doesn't really disadvantage too many people at once. It's more just that it feels rough, and it's, I don't know, for me, I personally think that the RedSec servers should be 60 hertz. They've voiced their concerns around that, I understand, but to me that is a pretty big issue that does make RedSec feel just slightly off. I can't even put a finger on it. It just doesn't feel as crisp as the actual multiplayer. Now, the last complaint that I really have is to do with Portal, because I felt like Portal was going to really improve in Battlefield 6 compared to 2042, and unfortunately after 100 hours it still feels like we are pretty much in the same place that we were in 2042, where Portal is just kind of an afterthought. It's so powerful, it's got so much potential. It could be arguably the most enjoyable part of this game if they actually focused on it properly, but there is just something wrong with how they're promoting it. There seems to be no promotion of like the really good modes that people have made. I've never gone on the main menu and seen promotion of like a really good mode, for example. They did that a little bit in 2042 with like the creator focused modes, for example, where like, I don't know, Stone Mountain would make a mode and they would put that on the main menu, for example. They need to do that with regular players. They need to be looking into Portal, finding some really good modes themselves and actually putting them on the main menu for people to see, because how it currently stands, people just aren't looking for that stuff. And even if you're looking, sometimes the best modes can be hidden at the very bottom of that server browser and they're just not getting any eyes on them. So I think Portal has insane potential. I think it could be arguably the thing that carries this game in a few years, but if they just treat it like they did with 2042, then unfortunately I think it's just going to be one of those things that's like a part of the game and no one really plays it, other than the more like diehard community. So how they go about fixing that, honestly, I'm not too sure, but I'm not paid to do that. That is their job, and hopefully they can come up with some fixes sometime soon. But that is pretty much it for some, I guess, revision on my initial review now that I've played 100 hours. I'll probably do the same sort of thing after I reach 500 hours, which to be honest is going to be a very long time from now. But if you guys enjoy this type of content, then yeah, be sure to let me know down in the comments section. I can always do that after maybe even 250 hours and then 500 hours and stuff like that. So let me know down in the comments, and also let me know how you guys are feeling about the game now that you've played however many hours you've played. I'm sure a lot of you probably have way more hours than I do. And so leave your thoughts down below as well. Let me know what you've kind of had issue with since the actual launch period of the game, and even some stuff that's grown on you since then as well. So leave all of that down in the comment section. But with that being said, thank you all very much for watching. You guys have a great day, and I'll see you all out there on the battlefield.